podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello everyone. In today's podcast, I'm joined by Susan Bryce, the mother of Sarah and Kathryn, two young Scottish stars who are playing in the 100 for the Oval Invincibles and the Trent Rockets respectively. How are you today, Susan?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, it's good to see you on Zoom this morning after meeting you last week at Trent Bridge for the Trent Rockets' first game against the Southern Brave. You must be one of a small group of people who are supporting two teams in the 100.
Yes, I suspect that is a little bit unusual.
Yeah, it's normally kids at school who are, support two football teams, So you're probably hoping for the Trent Rockets to play the Oval Invincibles in the final, but you can't have a tie in the final, so one of them will have to win the competition.
Yes, and somebody asked me actually the other day what I would do when they played each other. And my reply to that was I would hope that they both played well and performed well. I would hope that it would be a good contest and one of them will be happier than the other, probably.
Well, you can get a tie. There's no super, well, it's not a super over. There's no super set. There can be a tie, I think, in a group match. So you can hold out for the tie.
Well, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? No super over. Well, I guess you can't have an over, can you? So there'll be no super 5 or super 10.
No, I fell into that trap this morning when I was speaking to Sammy Jo Johnson, who's the podcast before you, and I kept calling the over, and I gave myself a telling off. But she said it as well. So, but as the mother of two Scottish international cricketers, you were born in England, is that right?
I was born in England. My mother is from Glasgow, but I was born in England in Kendal in the Lake District, and that's where I grew up and went to school until I moved to Edinburgh for university. So stayed there ever since. So I've been in Scotland, lived in Scotland for far longer than I've lived in England, I guess.
Oh, so we can't claim you as English anymore then? No.
No, well, I still have an English background, and I guess that's where I sort of first came across cricket, and that my mother in particular was an avid cricket watcher on the TV, so she would watch every ball of every test match. It was on in the background, and we used to go down to Old Trafford on a Sunday afternoon for the old John Player League and watch Clive Lloyd and that vintage playing cricket. So that's maybe my first introduction to cricket.
Oh, so cricket is there is some cricket links in the background then for Sarah and Kathryn.
Yes, not playing.
No.
Certainly from my aspect, but certainly an interest in cricket.
So, at what age did you find the two of them had an interest in cricket?
Probably, I guess, about primary 5, so it's age about 9-ish for Kathryn. But James and I are both very sort of sporty, and we like doing different things. James is a good golfer. I used to play hockey. So we very early on, I think, in the back garden would play ball games of any description, whether that was tennis, rugby, football. They went to sort of multi-sports camps as kids, enjoyable and Excel sports camps, those sorts of events, and played probably tennis, first of all, tennis lessons, and then the girls will have heard me tell this story many times, but they were lucky enough to go to George Watson's College in Edinburgh, which is one of the few schools that, certainly locally, that had a girls' cricket team. And Kathryn used to come home with a school bag, and the piece of paper in the bag with all that important information for parents was usually retrieved on a Friday evening, covered in all sorts of different stuff and scrumpled up from the bottom of the bag. But one Monday evening, she came home holding the piece of paper, which invited pupils in primary 5 to join the girls' cricket club. And I was not allowed to do anything, serve dinner, do anything, until I had contacted Liz Smith to say that Kathryn would be interested. And really it went from there.
Oh, so it all started with Liz Smith. And Kathryn was the first girl at George Watson's College to play for the boys' first 11, wasn't she?
That's right, yes. And then Sarah also did that a couple of years later. So both of them were lucky enough to have that opportunity.
Now, one thing I know that parents do, when I've spoken to a local person here called Ed Gowler, and he'd done a lot of travelling around for his son George, who's at the Northants Academy. You must have done an awful lot of that, travelling around the country, even abroad, taking Kathryn and Sarah to cricket matches.
Yeah, so I guess initially it was fairly local travel within Scotland. And to be honest, if you live somewhere like Scotland, you tend to be used to travelling reasonable distances anyway. With the Scotland women's team, we've been lucky enough to have 2 trips to global qualifiers, to Thailand in 2015 and to Sri Lanka in 2017. So those were both fantastic trips for us. And I guess it's since they've moved down to Loughborough and have started playing for county teams and regional teams, and now in the 100, it does mean quite a trek for us down to the middle and south of England to watch them play. But it's something that we just love doing, actually. We just love watching them. It's been great to see some of the matches now live streamed, which helps when we can't get away or can't see them, and that's been a real bonus. But there's nothing quite like watching sport live, really, is there? Although I find it quite nerve-wracking watching them, particularly when they're batting. So it's quite nice to be able to pace around the boundary one way or the other. But so lots of travelling, but very enjoyable, and we wouldn't miss it or change it, I don't think.
No, you can see the enthusiasm coming through there. And just for a bit of context, Kathryn made her debut for Scotland in 2011, Sarah in 2015. And when Sarah made her debut for Scotland, they were both playing together. That must have been a proud day when you saw them both playing in the same Scottish team.
Yes, I mean, amazing, isn't it? And to be honest, when you are bringing up children, you have absolutely no idea what the future holds for them. And, to see them both playing cricket at that level is just fantastic. But I guess what's more important is seeing them enjoying it, actually. And you do see in high-level sports that doesn't always seem to be the case. And that's one of the that is one of the things that really struck me about that first match of the 100 at the Oval, was just seeing how many players were just smiling and clearly enjoying the game from both teams. And that was really quite striking for me. And the fact that they both seem to love it, enjoy it, get so much out of it, have made so many friends from different teams, I think is as important as the quality of the sport that they play.
And for Scotland now, Kathryn is captain and Sarah is vice-captain. How do they work as a team?
I'm told they work quite well together. It's difficult to tell because they don't really chat to me about tactics or anything. But Kathryn may not mind me saying this, I think Sarah has a really analytical cricket brain. So she is very good, I think, at analysing. Kathryn is very good, I think, at leading from the front and leading by example. And so I think the two of them actually seem to work together very well. They've always been very close and they've always been very supportive of each other. If one of them's done well, the other one will be the first one to congratulate their siblings. So I think they've always had a really close bond together on the field. But I think Kathryn finds having Sarah there to help her when you're trying to be the opening bowler, batting quite high up and captaining a team, that is really tricky. So I think to have somebody else there to be able to help with some of the tactics and spot some different things, I think has been a real benefit to Kathryn as well.
Well, Kathryn's been a leader from a very young age. And of course, Sarah, that analytical mind probably comes from her being behind the stumps so she can see what's going on even when Kathryn's not bowling.
Yes, and she's also doing a maths degree as well. So that does seem to be the way that her brain works. It's very analytical, very methodical.
So she'll be one of these people that will be really studying the data and that for these matchups, as they keep saying.
Yes, well, she may well be wondering upon which basis the Duckworth-Lewis-Stern figures have been worked out for the new 100 competition.
Oh, we're not suggesting we're going to have a Bryce system that's going to come in and replacing the Duckworth-Lewis. But the 100, how many games have you seen so far?
So I think we've seen two at Lords. So both of them were lucky enough to get to play at Lords, and two at Trent Bridge. So we've seen 4 so far, and then we're off up to Headingley tomorrow, and then Edgbaston on Sunday, and then the big match at the Oval a week on Sunday.
We'll come on to that in a few minutes, the big match on the 8th of August. But how are the two girls finding playing at test grounds and playing with world-class players, both for and against them?
It's a very new experience for Sarah. Kathryn played in the Kia Super League for Loughborough Lightning, so she's had some experience of playing with world-class players, definitely. Although even those matches, the crowds were very much lower than the crowds have been from the 100, but she's had some exposure to that, which has undoubtedly stood her in good stead, I think. Whereas Sarah, when we spoke to her after that opening match at the Oval, was completely buzzing. I think she couldn't really, the noise, she said, was amazing. She couldn't speak to the person at point. It was so loud. She could just about communicate with Georgia Adams standing next to her at slip. So for her, it's a completely new experience, which just has to be brilliant, and you learn so much, I think, from those opportunities.
Yeah, it must have been fantastic for Sarah to play in that first match of the 100 for the Oval Invincibles, but with I think 1.6 million people watching on BBC Two that evening.
And she took the first catch or first wicket of the 100 competition as well, the women's 100 anyway. So additional bonus.
Yeah, well, Sarah is keeping wicket to Shabnim Ismail, who's probably the fastest female bowler in the world.
Yes, and so she was really excited about that prospect. I think I haven't really asked her how she's found it, but I think she's really enjoyed playing with all of the overseas players. So they've got 3 South African overseas players at the Oval Invincibles, and she did meet them in the World Cup qualifiers, the global qualifiers back in Colombo. So she's had that opportunity to try and bat against Shabnim Ismail. I think she'd much prefer wicket keeping to her than trying to bat against her. Yeah,
well, she's approaching 80 miles an hour. 80 miles an hour. They were talking about that on the radio this morning.
I'm sure she's standing a little bit further back than she does sometimes, certainly to her sister.
Our next 2 podcasts feature the legendary West Indian fast bowler and now Sky Sports cricket commentator Michael Holding. In episode 73, Michael talked about his new book, Why We Kneel, How We Rise. And in episode 74, I heard about his West Indian touring days in the UK during the 1970s and 1980s. Here's a short clip from our first podcast.
Because there are so many things that I never, ever was taught growing up in school. So many things about people of my color and my race did achievements that were never taught. They were hidden. They were airbrushed out of history because it didn't suit the narrative that people were pushing.
Now back to A Mum's View with Susan Bryce. Well, the Trent Rockets are currently in 6th place. They've won 1 out of 3. And the Oval Invincibles, as we're recording here on the Friday the 30th, they've won both their games, are in 3rd place and having only played 2 matches. And in the game yesterday, Kathryn bowled her set of 2 5 balls, and she only conceded 5 runs and 8 dots in that spell.
Yes, and the first 4 runs came from an inside edge as well. So, it was a terrific set of 10 balls. Exactly the same figures as Rashid Khan, I'm told, from the men's match later. So 10 balls, 5 runs and 1 wicket.
Oh, that's a good recommendation, because he's the sort of number 1 ranked player in the 100.
Yeah, and it was great to see Trent Rockets yesterday, actually. Their batting just hadn't quite fired in the first 2 matches. I thought they had bowled and fielded really well, but the batting didn't quite get going, whereas yesterday it did, obviously with Rachel Priest in particular. So it was really great to see that start to come together. So hopefully that's a good sign for the Trent Rockets moving forward.
Yeah, well, Sammy Joe said on a podcast that's going to go out the weekend that teams' momentum can change. You get on a roll and win a few games, and hopefully they can get up the table.
Mm.
But now we must look ahead to Sunday, the 8th of August, at the Oval, when the Oval Invincibles will be playing the Trent Rockets. Now, what colour shirt are you going to wear that day?
Well, I think I might wear a neutral shirt. James has acquired 2 floppy sun hats, one blue and one yellow, which he's been wearing interchangeably depending on which team we're watching. So he tells me he's going to wear one on top of the other on Sunday the 8th, and he will be his own personal win predictor, and the colour of hat that's sitting on the top will be the colour of the team that he believes to be ahead at that particular moment in the game.
That sounds safe, a safe bet there. Have you got other friends from Scotland who are coming down for that game as well?
Not sure about the game for the Oval, but Kathryn had a flatmate come to Lord's yesterday. There's 2 of James's cousins are coming to watch Sarah at Headingley tomorrow, and also I think about half a dozen of her old school friends are travelling down from Scotland as well, so that will be amazing. And they're not people who would normally come and watch cricket, so that'll be quite exciting.
Well, it's a big boost for Scottish cricket because we've also got other Scottish players playing in the 100. And I know when I spoke to Kathryn before, one of their ambitions is to get Scotland into the T20 World Cup one day.
One day, absolutely. And Abtaha Maksud is playing with Birmingham Phoenix. And it's been fantastic to see her bowl. And I guess a particular role model as a young Muslim woman wearing a hijab, but Abtaha and Sarah have usually been roommates on Scotland tours. They're really great friends. So again, there'll be the match on Sunday between Kathryn and Abtaha, and also her current housemate Kirsty Gordon as well. So there's quite a few matches that could be interesting.
Well, it's certainly a very big tournament for women's cricket because it's certainly reaching a much wider audience, and with women's cricketers now being on contract, you can only grow the women's game in particular, I think.
Yeah, so it's really quite striking, hasn't it, the number of people who've been in the crowd for the women's matches. I know there's always some concern with the double headers, but the ones that we've been at so far, the crowds seem to have been really good. And I know there's great debate about the 100 and whether it's the right format and whether it's right for cricket or not. And I guess that we will find that out, won't we, in the next few weeks and months. But certainly what we've experienced is that it's good entertainment. There's some great skills. There's some really great cricket. And I certainly think for the women's teams, it has raised their profile, and that has to be a very good thing for them.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Susan, for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion. I look forward to tuning in on Sunday the 8th of August for this special game. And we might spot you in the crowd on the television. You'll probably get other requests to be on other podcasts, but hopefully we're one of the first. And it would be lovely at some stage to get even all 3 of you on at the same time, perhaps after the game or a week or 2 after that, to talk about how it all went.
Well, that would be a pleasure. I'm sure the girls will keep me right and make sure that I don't say anything too controversial.
Right. Well, thank you very much again for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and now on Instagram at the Pad and Pad. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.